want to say greetings to each and every one of you, Aquaba, and welcome. Welcome to another round of the Conscious Roster Report here on the LIBRadio, LIBTV, livinginblack.com. Fridays on this report, we tune into talking about finances, making money. Fridays, we call it around here. And it's not just about finances, but it's how to maximize your spending power. Today's date is Friday, the 24th of October, the year 2025 in the Gregorian Western calendar. This corresponds to the year 6266 in the Kemetic calendar, to which we have realigned our cultural clock. Welcome to the 7th millennium. You have found your family in a peaceful place here on LIBRadio, LIBTV, here on livinginblack.com. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I hope you are in good spirits today. And I am not doing too bad at all. I think I have a compelling topic, a fascinating topic for us to study today on Making Money Fridays. Let me go right into the topic. Today's subject, the economic collapse of 4 global empires. Welcome to our podcast on LIBRadio. Today, we explore the intriguing parallels between the decline of the American economic empire and the historic collapses of Roman, Spanish, and British empires. By analyzing the economic, social, and political factors that led to their downfalls, we uncover valuable insights that may help us predict the future trajectory of the United States. Join us as we delve into history's lessons for today. And that is what we have to study for today. First of all, let's start off with a short piece of video. I'm going to grab this piece of video and copy it so you can have access to it as well. And hopefully we will learn from today's lesson. This is a very, very important lesson for us today. And I trust that we will all learn accordingly. So I'm going to put this video up on the stage right now. And let's go into this short piece of video. It's only going to last just about a minute or two. It's actually 4 minutes long. So here we go.
Rome, the Mongols, the Ottomans, the Soviet Union. 4 empires separated by centuries, cultures, and continents. And yet, their stories all end the same way. Collapse. Every empire believes it's different. This time is special. But what if I told you the downfall of Rome is playing out again right now? And maybe, just maybe, the United States isn't as immune as it thinks. Empires don't just vanish overnight. They follow patterns, cycles that repeat across history. There are 3 forces that show up again and again. First, overexpansion. The hunger to grow bigger, control more land, more people, more wealth. But expansion comes at a cost. Overstretched armies, endless wars, resources drained. Second, identity fractures. Empires look united on the surface, but inside, they're a patchwork of cultures, religions, and languages. When prosperity fades, those identities don't blend. They break apart. And third, elite decay. Corruption, greed, and power struggles hollow out leadership until the system rots from within. These 3, expansion, identity, and decay, are the script that history keeps recycling. Take Rome. At its peak, it stretched from Britain to the Middle East. But defending those borders drained its legions. Meanwhile, Romans argued over what it meant to be Roman. Germanic tribes, treated as outsiders, became the very force that toppled the empire. Or the Mongols. They built the largest land empire in history, from China to Europe. But their strength was also their weakness. Too vast to govern, too fractured in identity. Within a century, the empire split into rival khanates, each clawing at the other. The Ottoman Empire lasted 6 centuries, yet its diversity, Turks, Arabs, Greeks, Armenians, Kurds, became its breaking point. National identities surged, revolutions spread, and the empire crumbled after World War I. And the Soviet Union? It collapsed not because of one war, but because its vast expansion, failing economy, and suppressed identities, Ukrainians, Balts, Central Asians, finally tore it apart. Different times, different rulers, same story. So what about today? What about the United States? America isn't Rome. It isn't the Soviets. But it's not untouchable either. Over expansion, the U.S. has military bases in over 70 countries. Wars in Afghanistan and Iraq cost trillions. Just like Rome's legions, global reach comes with a price. Identity fractures? The United States calls itself a melting pot, but debates over race, culture, and national identity are tearing at the seams. Red versus blue, urban versus rural. Divisions that look uncomfortably familiar to students of history. And elite decay, lobbyists, corruption scandals, growing wealth inequality. History shows that when the ruling class stops serving the people, collapse speeds up. Does this mean America is doomed? Not necessarily, but it does mean the U.S. is not above the cycle that's consumed every empire before it. History doesn't repeat itself word for word, but it rhymes. The question is, will America learn from history's loop? Or are we just watching the same story play out all over again? If you want to see how the past keeps shaping our present,
All right. Well, we do want to see how the past keeps shaping our present. Malcolm X said in Message to the Grassroots, of all of our studies, history is most qualified to reward our endeavors. And if we study the history of other peoples, how they solve their problems, we could learn from that history and solve our own problems. That is, of course, paraphrasing from Malcolm X in Message to the Grassroots. Today, we're talking about what are the parallels between these 4 empires. So let me go right into the research. Decline of empires from currency crisis. We're really going to focus on not overextension, even though that will be an important part of this discussion, but we're really going to focus on the decline of these empires from a currency crisis. Let's break down how currency devaluation, debt, unrestricted money creation, and abandoning gold backing played vital roles in the decline of 4 major empires: Rome, Spain, Great Britain, and the United States. I'll explain the mechanism for each empire, then ask you to spot patterns amongst them. First, let's go to ancient Rome. Highlights early Roman currency. The denarius was mostly silver and widely trusted. Next point, emperor began debasing the coins, making them with less silver and more base metals to fund massive military and administrative costs. Point 3, as the real value of coins dropped, inflation soared. By 265 in the Common Era, the denarius contained only 0.5% silver. Prices rose over 1,000%. Next point, trust in Roman money collapsed. Commerce reverted to barter, and soldiers increasingly demanded payment in gold, undermining unity and stability. Next point, with no backing and no confidence, Rome lost its ability to support the military and government, accelerating its fall. And next point, major economic indicators signal the impending collapse of the Roman Empire. These reflected deep structural financial flaws and loss of monetary trust that ultimately crippled the empire's ability to function economically and politically. Now, let's go a little deeper dive into this. I have 8 key points on the collapse of the Roman Empire. I'm going to share with you number 1. Number 1, currency devaluation. Emperors repeatedly debased the denarius by reducing its silver content to fund military campaigns and public spending. By the 3rd century AD, the coin contained less than 1% silver, causing rampant inflation and destroying public faith in Roman money. Point 2, hyperinflation. As the value of the money plummeted, prices skyrocketed across the empire. Daily transactions became chaotic, and citizens increasingly reverted to barter. The state responded with price controls, such as Emperor Diocletian's, quote, edict on maximum prices, close quote. But this further disrupted trade and aggravated shortages. Point 3, excessive taxation. To sustain its massive bureaucracy and army, the empire imposed extremely heavy taxes. As trade slowed and production declined, the burden fell on fewer people, pushing rural peasants into serfdom and forcing urban residents to flee to the countryside to avoid tax collectors. Point 4, the collapse of internal trade. Rome's once vast trade network, connecting every part of the empire through roads and sea roads, collapsed under economic pressure and insecurity. Localized economies emerged, marking the end of efficient commercial exchange and the return to regional self-sufficiency. Point 5, government overspending and corruption. Public funds were squandered on political patronage, military luxuries, and entertainment, breads and circuses, rather than on productive infrastructure. This distorted resource allocation eroded trust in governance and stifled innovation and private enterprise. Point 5. I hope you can see the parallels to what we're going through today. It gets deeper. Point 5, or point 6, labor shortages, plagues, and declining birth rates reduced the available workforce. Combined with economic stagnation and rural flight, the empire faced agricultural shortages and declining output, weakening both the tax base and military recruitment pool. Number 7, breakdown of banking and credit. Early financial crises, such as the credit crash of 33 AD, contracted the money supply and destroyed trust in lending institutions. Frequent government seizures and confiscations discouraged private investment and limited economic recovery. Point 8, the loss of military and political cohesion from economic weakness. As the economy deteriorated, the state could no longer reliably pay or supply the army. This triggered mutinies, reduced defense capability, and made Rome vulnerable to invasions and internal revolts, turning a financial crisis into an existential collapse. And can't we see the stress that the U.S. military is going through, not only recently with this crazy meeting and speech that Defense Secretary, I can't remember his name, Hilgar or whatever his name, and Hillsgrith and Donald Trump. It was an absolute ridiculous parade for which many retired military officers, generals, etc., complained bitterly. Let's look at Spain, the second of these four empires. We're talking about Spain is a global empire between the 16th and 17th centuries. Point 1. Spain's New World silver was a windfall, but monarchs borrowed heavily against future shipments for wars and expenses. Point 2. The sudden influx of silver into the price revolution, quote unquote, massive inflation that doubled prices in just decades. Point 3. More money did not create more real wealth. Instead, devaluation and inflation eroded purchasing power and investor trust. And point 4. Frequent shipment losses, piracy, or storms meant debt defaults. By the late 1600s, lenders refused to provide credit to Spain. Spain's empire shrank without access to new debt, economic power, or monetary stability. Next, 8 interlinked factors regarding Spain's collapsing empire, all revolving around its dependence on imported silver, uncontrolled debt, and inflationary distortion of its domestic economy. And I would love to hear from you. I do see my brother Eddie. I see you, Sawabona. He said, greetings, Brother Keedy. In short, it seems greed, Greed, kills all empires. Will we ever learn? You're right. You're absolutely right, Brother Eddie. And it appears that greed is going to take this empire down as well. Will we ever learn? Apparently not. 8 points about the collapse of the Spanish Empire. Point 1, inflation from the silver flood. The massive influx of silver from Mexico and Peru triggered an inflationary surge that became known as the price revolution. Between 1500 and 1650, average prices across Spain increased roughly sixfold as more silver entered circulation, dramatically reducing the purchasing power of ordinary Spaniards. Point 2, the resource curse of silver wealth. Rather than fostering productive development, silver wealth created economic complacency. This over-reliance on a single extractive source of income, the so-called resource curse, made Spain rich temporarily but economically hollow in the long run, as domestic industries and agriculture stagnated. Point 3, chronic sovereign debt and repeated bankruptcies. Spanish Habsburg monarchs borrowed massively against anticipated silver shipments to fund continuous wars and imperial administration. Delays or losses of bullion shipments often left Spain unable to pay creditors, resulting in repeated defaults in 1557, 1575, 1596, and later during the 17th century. Economic defaults. Point 4, runaway military expenses. A huge portion of New World wealth was diverted into almost constant warfare against France, the Ottoman Empire, the Dutch Revolt, and later England. These conflicts drained revenues faster than silver could replenish them, leaving the empire trapped in a cycle of debt-financed war. Whew. And aren't we seeing the same thing happening here? Brother Eddie, I hope you are not the only one that can appreciate today's conversation. Let me just double check and see if we have anyone checking with us on Rumble. I don't see anyone. listening to us on Rumble today. So it is what it is. We got to keep on going. Next, we're up to point number 3. No, we got that. Point number 4. And we're up to point number 5. Collapse of domestic industry and agriculture. Inflation and dependence on imported gold and silver made Spanish exports less competitive. The availability of easy bullion led elites to neglect agriculture, craftsmanship, and manufacturing. Spain thus became dependent on foreign imports, even as bullion flow outward to pay for these goods. Point 6, population decline and labor shortages. Here we have it again, just like Rome. Large numbers of Spaniards emigrated to the Americas seeking wealth, while plagues and declining birth rates at home devastated domestic labor supply. This reduced agricultural output and raised wages, further damaging competitiveness and shrinking the tax base. And that demographics, aren't we seeing the exact same thing unfolding right now? Yes, we are. It's happening. And let alone President Donald Trump exporting a significant portion of what has become a U.S. labor force. They may be undocumented. They were still human beings, and they were still very much needed in the economy. Point number 7, credit collapse and capital flight. Repeated defaults destroyed international confidence in Spanish finance. Lenders in Genoa, Florence, and the Low Countries eventually refused credit. And it wasn't it lending from Italy or Genoa probably and Florence that allowed Christopher Columbus to engage in his enterprise to attempt to find a shorter route to India? Yeah, that's true. With capital fleeing abroad, Spain lacked the investment needed to maintain economic or military infrastructure. Declining silver yields and empire overstretch. By the early 17th century, the richest mines in the Americas began producing less silver. With reduced bullion inflow, but unrelenting debt and military expense, Spain's fiscal system imploded. The empire's over-reliance on this single income source left it unable to adapt when the silver streams slowed. In combination, these 8 factors that I've just listed transformed Spain from the wealthiest empire in Europe to an indebted, inflation-ridden state. The illusion of prosperity built upon constant silver inflows masked long-term decay in productivity, trade, and fiscal stability, leading to its irreversible economic decline. So here we go. We continue. 2 empires down, 2 more to go. Great Britain, the 20th century, was undoubtedly the world's most powerful global empire. Point 1, Britain used the gold standard to keep sterling's value stable and as international trust for lending. Point 2, World War I and the Great Depression strained its finances. Britain's debts ballooned and gold reserves shrank. Point 3, in 1931, faced with speculative attacks and untenable low reserves, Britain abandoned the gold standard. The pound was devalued by 25 to 30% against gold. And that happened in the United States too, exactly the same way. Point 4, while this gave Britain some short-term flexibility, the long-term loss of global monetary leadership and reliance on fiat currency set the stage for the sterling's decline as the world's reserve currency. So here are 8 major economic indicators that signal the decline and eventual collapse of the British Empire. These combine financial crises, structural inefficiencies, and the erosion of monetary strength that undermined its global economic leadership from the 19th to mid-20th centuries. Number 1 of our 8 keys: overextension of global commitments. Britain's vast empire required immense administrative and military expenditure. By the early 20th century, maintaining overseas colonies and trade routes became economically unsustainable, draining domestic resources and piling up debt as global competition intensified. Excuse me. Point 2, industrial decline and foreign competition. The early Industrial Revolution had made Britain the workshop of the world. But by late 19th century, new powers such as Germany and the United States overtook it. Britain's industries lagged in modernization and mass production efficiency, while foreign tariffs shut it out of key markets. That's industrial decline and foreign competition. One second. Continuing. Point 3. Capital export and domestic underinvestment. British investors poured enormous amounts of capital, over 1/3 of its national savings, into overseas projects instead of reinvesting at home. This deprived domestic industries of modernization funds, weakening Britain's competitive edge and technological base. Point 4. Loss of the gold standard and currency devaluation. The global crisis following the 1929 Wall Street crash triggered massive capital flight from Britain, a, quote, run on the pound, unquote, in 1931, forced the United Kingdom to abandon the gold standard, devaluing the pound by roughly 30%. This marked the end of the sterling's unquestionable global dominance. Point 5. Post-World War debt and fiscal overstretch. Both world wars left Britain enormously indebted. After World War II, external debt exceeded 200% of GDP, forcing reliance on American loans and loss of fiscal sovereignty. The pound sterling was no longer backed by sufficient gold reserves, ending its role as the world's reserve currency. Point 6. Inflation and rising costs of living. Devaluation and debt-fueled borrowing led to persistent inflation. Living standards stagnated as post-war rationing lingered well into the 1950s, while productivity failed to recover to pre-war levels. Economic stagnation eroded confidence in British leadership. And that economic stagnation is now crippled Britain really for all time. We talked about that stagnation, what's it called? Secular stagnation, and how, unfortunately, it will never recover. Number 7, collapse of colonial revenues. As independence movements accelerated after World War II, colonies that once provided cheap resources and large markets gained independence. The sudden loss of imperial trade preference disrupted the British balance of payments and narrowed its global commercial influence. And point number 8, structural unemployment and social discontent. From the 1920s through the 1970s, traditional industrial centers such as Wales, Scotland, and Northern England experienced chronic unemployment as coal, steel, and shipbuilding declined. Economic inequality and labor unrest grew, signaling the collapse of imperial era economic structures. And I would add to this as well the drain of supporting a non-productive monarchy. That's definitely not going to benefit them. And of course, just recently, a week ago in the United States, they had no king's parades all over this country. No king's, not parades, but no king's protests all over America. Over 2,700 people, groups rallied all across America in all 50 states, proclaiming we do not need a monarchy, which is unfortunate that the Donald Trump administration is now presenting itself more and more as a monarchy as opposed to the democracy that the MAGA supporters had voted for. So together, these 8 factors reflect how the British Empire's monetary mismanagement, unsustainable global debt, and declining industrial base converged to dismantle its economic supremacy. Once symbolized by sterling and gold trade control, Britain's economy was gradually eclipsed by the U.S. and other continental powers, marking the end of empire through financial exhaustion rather than battlefield defeat. So that brings us up to the present. And I want to thank you, Brother Eddie, for responding. You may be my only listener today. I can't tell. He said, this is very good information with 2 exclamation points. I do agree. If people couldn't just learn that having too much pretty / shiny stuff will always bring you down, Merry Christmas. Ho, 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 ho. That was pretty good, Eddie. That was really good. I appreciate you, man. I love my audience because my audience contributes always so much to what we are serious about studying. And right now, Eddie, it might just be you and me. I put up a promo and sent out the promo for today's conversation, but very, very few people are checked in. I suspect it's because people don't want to hear what is about to happen. It's really, really bad news. Bad, very bad news. Personally, I'm compelled, I'm fascinated by future studies. So I trust that you are too as well. He said this is very good information. Excuse me, I'm sorry. But here, let me wet my whistle. And 1 second, be right with you. All right, I am back again. That water is so delicious when your mouth is. It's not that my throat is dry. It's just that as I'm speaking, I'm moving mucus out of my lungs, which I've been talking all day. So that's what talking does. So next up, we're going to go to the 4th falling empire. It is the United States Empire, the 20th and 21st centuries. Let's go into it. The US dollar was once backed by gold, but Richard Nixon ended convertibility in 1971, making the dollar a fiat currency. Since then, unrestricted printing and rising debt have eroded the dollar's value. It has lost over 90% of its purchasing power since 1933, and about 98% since 1971. As debt increases and faith in the dollar erodes, inflation rises and investors seek alternatives. While collapse has not yet occurred, high debt and continuous deflation follow the warning signs seen in previous empires. So I'm going to, one second, just a little bit of formatting, make it easier to read when I come back, because I have to come back to these notes that I make on the daily show to do things like the Carl Nelson show, which I did every day, just yesterday. I hope you got a chance to hear it. I did record it, and I've been playing it on our playback throughout the day. And you can always go to Rumble and hear the entire program. No, that's not on Rumble. That was Carl Nelson's show. I'm going to share with you a video right now. I'm going to copy, paste this here for our YouTube family. I'm going to paste it also here for our Rumble family, and also one time I'm going to paste it here on Facebook as well. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this document is entitled How Every Empire Fell. This video is entitled, I should say, How Every Empire Fell and Why America is Next. Rome, Spain, Britain. The same mistake every time. The same mistake every time. So let me share with you, present this video, share screen. How Every Empire Fell. I'm going to push this up into StreamYard, add to the stage, and now this video is going to last just over 2 minutes.
Every great empire believes it's different, smarter, stronger, built to last forever. But history keeps whispering the same warning. They all fall the same way, not through invasion, not through revolution, but through money. Through the slow, quiet death of their own currency. Rome ruled the known world for 5 centuries, until its silver coins turned to dust. Spain controlled oceans of gold and silver, until their wealth became worthless. Britain commanded the globe, until the pound collapsed under its own debt. The pattern never changes. Military overreach, endless spending, money printing, inflation, loss of trust, collapse. And now in 2025, the same storm clouds hang over America. Like Rome, we've built bases in every corner of the world. Like Spain, we've flooded the system with easy money. Like Britain, we've borrowed beyond reason, believing the dollar will stay king forever. But history doesn't care about belief. It cares about math. The US debt has exploded past $36 trillion. Every new dollar printed buys less. Prices climb, trust erodes, and the world quietly looks for a way out. Gold, crypto, trade blocks, new systems that don't depend on us. And here's the part no chart can show. When currency dies, it's not politicians who suffer first. It's workers whose paychecks buy less every month. Retirees whose savings vanish. Families who did everything right and still lose everything. Rome didn't realize it was collapsing until its soldiers stopped marching. Britain didn't see it until their empire slipped through their fingers. In America, we still have time, because the pattern doesn't guarantee collapse. It guarantees consequence. Unless we learn, empires fall when they forget that money is trust. And trust, once broken, takes generations to rebuild. The question isn't whether we're Rome in its glory days or Rome in its final years. The question is, can we be the first empire in history to see the warning signs and change course before it's too late? Because history doesn't repeat itself. It rhymes, and right now, that rhyme sounds a lot like us.
Wow. History doesn't repeat itself. It rhymes. That's very powerful. And I think this government is not capable of reading the rhymes of history and turning around. It's too much greed, too much corruption, too much selfishness, avarice. It's gone too far. The gap, the rising wealth gap. Well, let's talk about 8 key indicators suggesting the ongoing economic decline of the United States empire. And let's just hope that maybe somebody will hear today's show and give me a call. Often referred to as the American empire, arising from unsustainable debt, currency devaluation, and the weakening of its global monetary dominance. Point 1. Mounting national debt and fiscal deficits. The United States national debt surpassed 130% of GDP by 2025. I was going to say it was at 127%, but it has risen 3 points in the last 6 months. U.S. national debt surpassed 130% of GDP by 2025, driven by structural deficits and entitlement obligations. Servicing this debt now consumes more than 20% of federal revenue, creating a debt spiral similar to pre-collapse empires whose finances became dominated by interest payments. Point 2. De-dollarization and weakening reserve status. Foreign central banks are gradually reducing their holdings of U.S. dollars and treasuries. The dollar's share of global foreign exchange reserves fell from 65% in 2014 to under 58% in 2024, its lowest level in 2 decades. This shift toward other currencies and gold marks an international move away from U.S. monetary dominance. So they're talking about it fell from 65% to under 58%. That would be what, a 7-8% decline in a decade. And it is at its lowest level. The speed of the decline of the value of the dollar in global exchange, the speed of that decline will probably increase. Point 2. Point 3. Declining foreign demand for U.S. treasuries. Foreign ownership of U.S. debt has dropped from over 50% during the 2008 crisis to around 30% in 2025. Reduced international confidence in U.S. fiscal stability pushes yields upward, increasing borrowing costs and threatening future fiscal sustainability. Point 4. Now it's getting a little technical, but follow along. If needed be, you can go back and study all this again. You should be taking notes. Point 4. Persistent inflation and dollar devaluation. The U.S. dollar index fell by over 10% in the first half of 2025, its worst performance in half a century. Amid high inflation and declining confidence in the Federal Reserve's ability to maintain long-term price stability. Purchasing power erosion mirrors patterns seen in earlier imperial declines due to uncontrolled monetary expansion. Purchasing power parity. That's it. Number 5. Trade imbalances and industrial hollowing. America's chronic trade deficits, averaging over $900 billion annually, have hollowed out domestic manufacturing capacity. High global demand for dollars makes U.S. exports expensive and imports cheap, accelerating deindustrialization, a dynamic economist term, quote, the reserve currency curse. The reserve currency curse. And remember when we talked about the collapse of the Spanish Empire? It wasn't a reserve currency curse, it was a resource curse. The excess of silver flooding the Spanish economy. Well, now that silver is now a fiat, and it's called the reserve currency curse. It really doesn't exist. It's just numbers. Just numbers. It doesn't exist. Whereas in Spain, they had actual silver with which they didn't just use silver as a currency, it was also used to manufacture goods. And you have manufactured goods from Spain from the 16th and 17th century that if you get your hands on them today, they are gaining value. So you have to put that reserve into industrialization, manufacturing. It's, to me, it's kind of clear, but I don't run things not at that scale. Erosion of trust in U.S. financial institutions. Political polarization and repeated debt ceiling crises have shaken global confidence in U.S. fiscal governance. As J.P. Morgan Research notes, quote, foreign investors increasingly perceive internal instability as a risk factor that undermines the dollar's, quote, safe haven reputation. So that's your erosion of trust. And now the world is witnessing the political crises in America that has it now refusing to even pay its government employees with this government shutdown. Is there any way that you can imagine, Brother Eddie, I'm talking to you, is there any way that you could imagine this massive government shutdown would inspire trust in U.S. financial institutions? Point 7, the shift toward gold and alternative currencies. Emerging markets such as China, Russia, and Turkey have doubled the share of gold in their foreign reserves over the past decade, viewing it as a protection against fiat devaluation. The trend reflects waning faith in fiat currencies dominated by the U.S. dollar. Number 8, global moves away from the dollar-centric trade, Nations, including China, India, and Brazil, are expanding non-dollar bilateral trade settlements. This gradual diversification undermines the petrodollar system, long the foundation of U.S. monetary strength, and signals a structural geopolitical shift in global trade power. And these nations doesn't just include China, India, and Brazil, but you were talking about Russia, South Africa. A number of different states are getting out of the dollar as a trade currency. Kenya was on that track as well. I suspect that William Ruto came to Washington, D.C. I think it was 2022 he came to Washington, D.C. and changed his mind. I'm going to just say that. I almost said something really nasty. I think he changed his mind on sovereign and independent growth for Kenya. And we'll report sometime next week on William Ruto's apparent treachery. Point number 9, rising inequality. America's expanding wealth and income gap erodes social cohesion and undermines democratic institutions, leading to public disillusionment. This weakens the U.S.'s global influence as economic disparities hinder sustainable growth, limit opportunities for the middle class, and diminish the nation's soft power and leadership abroad. And point number 10 of 10, corruption and greed. Corrupt governance and inconsolable greed erode public trust and distort policy priorities, prioritizing special interests over the national interests. These economic disparities result in widespread social unrest. This turmoil weakens governance and undermines the U.S.'s credibility, ultimately diminishing its global leadership and contributing to rapid imperial decline. These warning signs reveal a familiar imperial trajectory: reliance on debt finance consumption, decline of productive industry, erosion of currency faith, and the global retreat from dependence on the empire's financial system. Like Rome, Spain, and Britain before it, the U.S. faces the dual challenge of maintaining global influence while managing the burdens of its own monetary overreach. Together, these 10 forces are acting against the interests of the American empire, rooted in fiscal mismanagement, monetary debasement, and loss of confidence. Ultimately, they transformed Rome, Spain, and Britain from expansive trade-based empires into fragmented, impoverished states that could no longer sustain themselves economically. We can see that the U.S. is drunkenly stumbling along the exact same pathway as its historical precedents. So these 4 empires ultimately were taken down from debasing their over issuing currency, that's Rome, Spain, and the U.S., from building unsustainable debt, Spain, Britain, and the U.S., abandoning gold, Britain, and the U.S., and losing public trust in money, all 4 empires taken down. Currency is powerful, but only as strong as the confidence and the discipline behind it. And that is our takeaway lesson today. Currency is powerful, but only as strong as the confidence and discipline that has been backing that. So I see you in the house, Brother Eddie. He said, I think I asked him, do you think the U.S. can recover? He just said simply, no. No. There is no recovering from this. There's only the painful journey as we within this nation continue on this course. There's only the painful journey. And as long as we, the working class, are in a position to be victims of the wealthy class, other than the French Revolution solution that took place in the late 18th century, other than the French Revolution solution, there's not much that we can do except for suck it up and take the pain. As the empire, I grew up in the American empire. For the young people that are out here today, you may not realize what it truly means to grow up in the most wealthy, powerful nation, respected nation in the world. But my generation, the baby boomers, are responsible for collapsing the American empire. Donald Trump, I think he is a baby boomer. No, he may be a little bit older than a baby boomer, but Donald Trump is an individual. Individuals do not wreck entire economies. It don't work like that. Donald Trump is the worst example of governance one could point to. But the guy before him, Joe Biden, wasn't he the worst example of governance that one could point to? And while we didn't see the American empire collapse under Obama, Obama's economic policies of bailing out the banks, the corporation, the banksters, and the rapidly increasing wealth gap under Barack Obama's presidency indicate to me that he was the worst fiscal manager of an economy up to that time. And under Obama's leadership, the wealth gap, which was on my list, the wealth gap expanded to where it was the worst that had been in 100 years. So before Barack Obama is, of course, George Bush Jr. And that military expansion under George Bush Jr. kind of sealed America's fate. Kind of sealed America's fate. And before him, the only fiscally responsible leader America's had as president was actually Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton, I don't think people have given him credit enough for his economic success in reducing, very briefly, and not even just a small portion, reducing the federal debt. He didn't eliminate it. Couldn't eliminate it. But he did reduce the year-on-year debt for, I think, the last 2 years of Bill Clinton's presidency. And I'm going to give him credit for that, since today's conversation has focused on how economics collapse these empires, mismanagement of economics. The title, The Economic Collapse of 4 Global Empires. And now we have Donald Trump. Do you recall the book? The book is by Johann Galton. He talked about the collapse of the American empire. So what's next? I believe was the title of the book. And so we're witnessing it right now in real time. You are witnessing history, a very powerful history, going down right now. Oh, what a wonderful journey it has been. May you live in interesting times, is the ancient Chinese curse. May you live in interesting times. It appears that we are cursed. We allowed it to happen. We as a whole, I didn't have anything to say. I have not been greedy. I have not been made light, the basket given to the poor. But we witnessed it. And our cultural habits contributed to it. I'm going to begin to wrap up today's conversation. We went almost exactly an hour, and that's exactly what I had intended to be. We have a lot of great conversations coming up. I'm going to be returning to a couple more topics on health. Next week we will have a guest. Brother Mbwebe will be with us. He has a new book out. Very important book. I think so. Next week, we're going to come back Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We're going to have at least 2 conversations on health. The first conversation I'm going to have is a functional medicine approach to female sexual interest arousal disorder, FSIAD. What is female sexual interest arousal disorder? Yeah, it is what it sounds like. And we're going to talk about this disorder. And then I'm going to have another conversation. We're talking about what known carcinogens the Food and Drug Administration allows into the U.S. food supply. And you're going to be a bit shocked. Maybe nothing shocks you anymore. It's hard to tell. But you may be a bit shocked at the number of known carcinogenic chemicals, many of them banned in Canada, the UK, and the European Union. Many of them banned in other countries. But these leaders in America, these corrupt leaders, allow the U.S. population to be poisoned by that. Based upon what I just started studying this morning, based upon what I'm learning, obviously, just another reason why I will never eat any parts of a pig ever again. But wait a minute, turkey? Yeah. Chicken? Yeah. Beef? Yeah. All of the above. Because they put chemicals in them. Antibiotics, steroids, growth hormones, all of these chemicals that are known carcinogens. Let alone all the shaky, questionable chemicals. So we're going to be taking these topics on next week. Of course, Sunday is our flagship program. It is the Mastermind. Baba Juniors will be with us this week. So I expect to have the whole crew on hand for the Mastermind. And lastly, I want to say this much, and I cannot overemphasize the point. We need your support. Your support. The easiest way is to go to http://keidi.biz/CRP 2012 and buy a book or 2. That's the easiest way. I cannot overemphasize the point. We do need your support. We're asking for it. Earlier this year, you heard us go beyond asking for it, saying, hey, listen, this support is going to have to show up, or we're going to begin to be forced. We will be forced to begin to shut all of this down. And personally, I didn't want to. I didn't want to shut down LIBRadio. And you did respond. And you bought us some time. Well, the time you bought is almost completely run out, and we're back to that same position once again. We're going to do a fund drive in December, but somehow we got to get through November. Now, I'm going to make it real easy on those of you who are listening to us on Rumble. I want to make it real easy. Down, right underneath the chat window, right under the message where you input your chat, there's a little $ button and another button that looks like a gift box. Both of those, you have the ability to make a contribution to our efforts here. The gift box is the rant. The $ is a rant from Rumble. And we're almost at the point where we can cash it out. It has to reach so much in it before we can cash it out. It's like $6.02 short. Can you and I come up with $6.02? Well, I'm in it for the labor. And for me, the labor is like $70, more than $70 a day, because it takes me up to 4 hours to prepare for a show. Today's show took a long time. Preparing the artwork, gathering all the research, putting it into a cohesive narrative, formatting that narrative. But I love it. Obviously, I love it. Otherwise, I wouldn't give to it every day. Do you love what we do? Do you like how you feel? Who sang that? That was Shaka Khan. We do love what we do together. Eddie writes, you get the final word today, Eddie. He said, yes, we are cursed. How do we not allow ourselves to learn? There's no answer to that question, Eddie. It's not you. It's not me. We do learn. But the corrupt billionaire class, they're willing to sacrifice America for their own greed, selfish greed, and avarice. That's true. Elon Musk wants to put the billionaires on his SpaceX and go colonize another planet, Mars. Good. Take as many of them as you can cram onto your SpaceX and go to Mars, where there is no atmosphere, none to speak of. There's no walking in the park, no out enjoying nature like George Washington Carver did, speak and listen to the plants, hearing the voice of God. These crazy people, they are the ones who are cursed. They are truly cursed, while you and I have ma'at to move forward on. And on that note, I want to thank you for tuning in today. We got everything in. We got it all in. And we're going to keep moving forward. There's just we have no choice. It's victory or death. And quite simply, we ain't died yet. I want to thank you all for tuning in to your favorite. We aim to be your favorite. We are LIBRadio, LIBTV. We are livinginblack.com. I want to just tell you, there's going to be a lot of good stuff coming from LIBRadio in the future. And I don't want you to abandon us. We're not going to abandon you. We're going to be here. We're going to come strong. Peace and prosperity. to each and every one of you.